Good evening, folks. My name is Damien Willie. Welcome to a Socialist Telly Damo Meets special. We haven't had one for a while. There has been much in the news lately regarding universal credit and the withdrawal of the £20 uplift, which is set to plunge a great many people further into poverty. What has been less well public uplift was never rolled out to the most sick and the most disabled who are not in receipt of universal credit. For those most ill, most disabled people are still on the old benefit system, which is often referred to as the legacy benefit system. Throughout the COVID pandemic crisis, these people have been given no additional support to meet additional costs at all. For the people behind DPAC, Disabled People Against Cuts, neither the uplift cut nor the lack of it for the most vulnerable there's been the most coverage of. Not that that's saying a huge amount, really. Some 6 million people are about to be clobbered by what is being called the largest single cut to social security in British history. The poorest and often most vulnerable are about to lose £20 a week, combined with rising energy bills, rising inflation. The COVID crisis is worsening again, the very reason the uplift was given to start with, and employment is still very unstable on top of that. How can the government justify this cut?
The simple answer to that is they simply do not care. You know, that you saw Theresa Coffey's remarks, the Secretary of State for DWP on Monday, when she basically said she's entirely happy to slash universal credit for millions, and you know, everyone can get an extra 2 hours a week if they're working, rather than, you know, get the £20 uplift. Well, I'm sorry, but that's complete and utter fabrication. Only yesterday, Rishi Sunak in Parliament turned around and said that by cutting £20 a week won't increase poverty, but it's all right for him, having applied for £1.5 million of home improvements to his mansion in Yorkshire, putting in a swimming pool and a tennis court and a gym, and having a, you know, a billionaire wife to have extra funding and all the rest of it. But you know, it's absolute travesty what's happening with universal credit, and we're still urging the government to, you know, have a serious rethink and, you know, push back and make the uplift permanent. I mean, I read somewhere that the amount they spent on PPE, I think they had spent about 2.8 billion on extra on PPE recently. They could also, with, you know, other money, keep the uplift going for another 6 months over the winter, but the uplift needs to be made permanent. I mean, to see 6.5 million claimants just plunged into poverty, 230,000 children, you know, are going to be going hungry and everything like that. The stories that we've heard over the months are absolutely horrific. It's just awful, absolutely awful. But you've got a government who are not listening to even the architect of universal credit, Ian Duncan Smith, has come out and said, you know, the uplift should be made permanent. You know, who would have thought Ian Duncan Smith, our arch nemesis, you know, would come out and say something like that? But you have had Tory MPs, charities, you know, and an awful lot of other people who say the government should really rethink, make the £20 uplift permanent.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak, it's all right for some. It's only one of his mansions, of course, that he's having these home improvements being done on. I mean, it must be nice to have more than one. But yes, he is an extremely wealthy individual. His in-laws are ridiculously wealthy, billionaires. So it's a little bit rich, if you excuse the pun, for such an individual to be telling people that these cuts are necessary, and for the current work and pensions minister to say, you know, work is the best route out of poverty. It's an old line that was coined by Ian Duncan Smith, essentially the original minister, colloquially referred to as the Minister for Death. But for him to turn around and actually say, no, this cut is wrong, it's too far, it's too deep, given everything that he did actually do, it should be alarming an awful lot of people, but it doesn't seem to be. And of course, it should be noted that some 40% of universal credit claimants are actually working. So for somebody like Therese Coffey to say that, oh, they just need to work a bit more, she doesn't appear to understand how her own government's benefit system works, saying they only need to work another 2 hours to make up the shortfall. Well, the minimum wage is not £10 an hour, it is £8.91. And for every extra pound earned, the universal credit taper takes 63 pence back, meaning £8.91 per hour becomes more like £3.30 an hour. So actually, to make up the shortfall, a claimant would need to work basically a whole extra full shift, which is not practical. When to make ends meet, many are already working more than one job. How can anyone possibly find extra hours? There aren't enough in the day. Work is not the route out of poverty anymore, is it?
I mean, I've got the secretary of my trades council right now. She's working 3 jobs. She works as an admin for a school, then she's a supervisor at lunchtime, right? Then she rushes home from that, 2 o'clock, starts an evening shift in a pub at 4 and doesn't finish that till 1 o'clock in the morning. And then she's back at school at 6 in the morning, right? I spoke to her earlier on, and she's doing 100-hour weeks at the moment, right? You can't keep that level up forever. You've got nurses working 2 or 3 jobs, right? I've had to, during lockdown, I lost my mental health support on the NHS. It was cut with 2 days notice, like 2 days after my aunt passed away from coronavirus, right? Sorry. My therapist is working 2 to 3 jobs to feed her kids, you know, and it's rich for Theresa Coffey to say, oh, you know, work an extra 2 hours when, you know, a great many people are working 2, 3 jobs simply to try and put food on the table. And only today, you know, it's been in the media that inflation's risen, you know, 3.2%, the highest since 2012. They reckon it's going to go by 4% by the end of the year. I mean, everyone's talking about the cost of food prices just going up and up and up. Energy prices are going up and up and up. And they're talking, because obviously I'm in London, and, you know, we're having issues with TfL at the moment and the cuts there. But they're talking about rail ticket prices rising 5% in January. Yet South Western Rail Network are going to be looking at making 15% cut to off-peak and on-peak services, you know. So you're going to get clobbered by increased rail prices, but you're going to be hit by rail cuts. And it's the same with buses. They're taking buses off the route, but prices are rising. So you're paying a hell of a lot more for a lot less. And that's got to be stressed. And, you know, what is it going to take for people to rise up and, you know, get this government out is the answer of that. Well, that is the question I often ask myself, to be honest with you. What is the breaking point that will get people out in the streets and say to this government, enough is enough? You know, what will it take? That's what I often ask myself. What is that breaking point?
But it's not just finding a breaking point, because everybody has different breaking points, but it's finding those people and getting organized and rallying around, and to rally around what you guys are doing at DPAC is certainly one place that such people can go. I mean, the stories that you've outlined just there are entirely typical of a great many people. They are working 2 or 3 jobs. They are working in excess of 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and they are barely getting by, if they're getting by at all. I mean, you've outlined a number of other factors that are coming into play as well. Once, as you know, the universal credit cut, you know, it's over £1,000 a year these families are going to lose. But you are talking about a rise in inflation of 3.2%. So, I mean, if anybody remembers the nurses' pay rise that the Conservatives were crowing about at 3%, if inflation's at 3.2%, that 3% rise is already a pay cut for them, on top of already the rising costs of parking for them, because parking charges for hospital staff are absurd, and that's going to go up to 4% for the new year. There's the national insurance hike, which of course hits the poorest paid of all, because you start paying national insurance before you even start paying income tax. That's gone up 1.25%. You've got energy prices that are rising on average of £139 a year, On top of that, going into the winter period, the rail fares going up by 5% in January. They go up every single year without fail, despite the services being what they are. And anybody who uses those services knows how poor they are. But it's getting cheaper now to drive a car than it is to get a ticket to go on a train. It's that crazy now. And of course, there's the fuel and food prices going up as well. And it's going up all the time. And still, you're going into the shop and quite often you're finding you cannot get what you want either. Although that's a completely different set of an argument for another day, not one to be covered today, perhaps. But you've got all of these factors all happening all at the same time. It's little wonder people like the Trussell Trust are saying over 1 million people are going to be, 1 million more people are going to be using food banks going into the winter period. And I can't help but think there's going to be fewer people to put stuff in the food bank bin when more people are going to be needing to use them. It's a horrible, vicious cycle, and things are looking very, very gloomy.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday, I was part of a demonstration in London, Unite Community Activists and different organisations, and the National Shop Stewards Network supported us outside Parliament as we had a demo during PMQs around the universal credit cut to, get Boris Johnson to do a rethink. And but obviously that was the day that he did his cabinet reshuffle, so trying to get publicity for what we were doing yesterday. Whenever you try and get the publicity you need for campaigning and everything, they pull the rug from under you, and out comes the reshuffle, and the media are focusing on that, where the sharp focus needs to be on the claimants who are at the sharp end of this cut and are, going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, worrying about how to get winter coats for their kids, how to put food on their table, and how to keep the home warm over the winter time. It's an absolutely callous, cruel cut that the government are implementing. It's just nasty, absolutely nasty.
Yeah, it was an entirely cynical move, and it was timed precisely to bury the news of what they were doing with universal credit, to vote to still cut this £20 uplift, which is going to be so detrimental to so many people. And for what? So we could play musical chairs with the lack of talent that he has to play with, frankly, in order to run the country. Of course, one thing that all of these ministers who will have been sacked, even if they've actually been given a new post, is that each of them is getting severance of £17,000 before they, as they toddle off back to the back benches with their expenses and with their £80,000 odd a year wages that they get in Parliament. 17,000. That's a year's uplift basically for 17 universal credit families for each minister that got replaced, essentially, or got moved. Even it left a very sour taste in my mouth when you look at it from that perspective.
I think there was I can't remember who the Tory MP was that recently, when he agreed with the £20 uplift cut, and they said, well, are you going to miss £20, if you're in the same position, and he turned around and said, well, no, I spend, £20-30 on coffee, cups of coffee a week, they don't miss that money. I mean, you look at, other MPs. I remember when we did like Ian Duncan Smith, and what he claimed for a breakfast was £39 and £9 for a cocktail and everything like that. We're making stark choices between basic food supplies and whether to heat our home and everything like that, and they're real stark choices. And you had the UN Special Rapporteur for Extreme Poverty and Human Rights actually said that the government needs to do a full impact assessment on the universal credit cut, and was extremely concerned that it was a human rights breach under international law. But you've got a government who won't ratify the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities and the articles under that convention, and won't even enshrine the right to independent living into domestic law. They've been found guilty of grave and systemic human rights violations under the convention, and they just will not, just completely and utterly blanket. So we're going to need an awful lot of pressure going forwards, but we're going to need people to unite and fight on all the issues because they all interlink. You look at universal credit, many people can't afford to, broadband or have access to a computer and need a library to access a computer. But what people often aren't aware of, there's been 810 libraries that have shut since 2010, 32,000 plus computers taken out of a library. Universal credit is an online application, and then you've got 14 million disabled people. A third of that number can't use a computer or have access to one. Older people, and everything's going online. Hospital appointments, access to a GP, the benefit system, everything's online, and it's deliberate. And when you haven't got access to broadband or the internet or anything like that, it's excluding you from accessing services and getting the support you need. I mean, we had one person in Croydon who couldn't afford broadband and actually sat outside during their daily exercise during the pandemic on the library steps to access the Wi-Fi. So they could job search during the pandemic. These are the kind of stories that need to be out there more in the public domain, really.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that gets me with the special rapporteur and the UN especially is the fact that, as you outlined so well, you got numerous cases where they have found systemic violations against disabled people, and of course the special rapporteur for poverty has highlighted the damage that is going to come about to people's lives from this universal credit cut. But where is the legal pressure on the UK government to force them to rethink it? There was none before from the international community. I'm cynically not particularly convinced there's going to be any this time either. What exactly do we need other countries to do in order to make our government toe the line, essentially? Because that's the only place the pressure is going to come from on them. We don't have an opposition as such in this country to it anymore.
I think it's hugely important that we still continue our work with the UN on raising the issues and collecting the evidence against the government, because actually it does embarrass them. When international countries hear what's happening here in the UK, it actually embarrasses the government massively. The fact that they were found guilty of grave and systemic human rights violations is a stain on the government's reputation internationally, and it's got to be said that there is a global attack on disabled people's rights right around the world, and many other countries have brought in sweeping cuts to disabled people and low paid income workers and everything like that, and that shouldn't be ignored. But we do need, on workers' rights, we do need a bigger international fight. And for disabled people's human rights, DPAC have done a lot of work over the years, and obviously during the pandemic, in linking up the international struggles, because they are pretty much one and the same.
Yeah. Now, you guys at DPAC know that the government isn't listening over this. You've been part of the 20 More for All campaign, which has been looking to extend the uplift to those not already getting it, those not on universal credit, who we'll come to in a moment. But given the government aren't listening, you've decided to send a message they can't fail to hear under the heading of Audio Riot. Could you tell us about your Audio Riot plans, please? What is happening and how people could get involved?
Okay, well, we're going to start on the 25th of September. We're going to have a national day of local action. So people can put on a local protest, have a street stall in their community, get the trades councils, get local groups involved, and make as much noise as possible. Because basically why we've called it Audio Riot is because it's a big two fingers up to the government over the crime and police bill, and they're going to be banning noisy protests. Noisy protests will be a nuisance. So we want people to make as much noise as possible to say to this government, we will not be silenced on what is happening to us, and we will speak out loud and true on what's happening to us. And also we will use our streets to protest. They will not stop us from doing that. So on the 25th, which is the Saturday, we need as many local actions as possible. DPAC will publicise them on the website. We need the lead activists' details so we can put people in touch with whatever's going on. My branch in Bromley and Croydon are going to be doing a Universal Credit Street stall near East Croydon Station from 11:30 to 1:30. So people can come down and join with us. And then on the Monday, the 28th, we have obviously the legacy benefit court case begins. So the 28th and 29th, and we'll go over that in a little while. Yeah. But to support the two disabled claimants who are bringing the case against the government, we're going to be having a court vigil outside the Royal Courts of Justice in solidarity with them. So from 9:15 till 10 a.m, we'll be at the Royal Courts of Justice highlighting the issues around the case, and also highlighting legacy benefit claimant stories of how, you know, what has happened to them without the £20 uplift during the pandemic, and what the £20 would mean to them if they per week, what it would mean to them if they could receive that. Later on at 11:30, we're going to be meeting at King's Cross courtyard. I can't tell you exactly what we're going to be doing, but we're asking people to bring their drums, their whistles, anything that makes noise, anything. Okay. And you know, we've got a playlist of protest songs, we've got samba bands. The noise is going to be at construction level, so we're going to make as much noise as we possibly can. Obviously, we're a direct, peaceful, non-violent direct action group, so obviously it's our first direct action protest in 18 months. So we're going to be out there on the streets doing what we do best. And obviously, because of the noise, and you know, many disabled people have access with noise, we will be providing earplugs and ear defenders and everything like that, and asking people to bring their own. So we're asking people to come far and wide to join in with that, but support the actions online. Hashtag Audio Riot, share the graphics. DPAC Sheffield have made some really snappy, cool little videos and some brilliant colourful graphics. Share those, hashtag Audio Riot, share the Facebook event link, the call outs and everything like that. But it's to highlight the universal credit card, also the legacy benefit court case, but also all the other cuts that disabled people have experienced during the pandemic. And it's got to be stressed here and now that the government used the Care Act of 2014 and the easements under the Act to cut social care during the pandemic when it was needed the most. So when, you know, you had 3 million people towards the end of last year shielding, but first lockdown, that social care support was needed. And, you know, the government used the pandemic to cut it. It was absolutely horrific. And we're also going to be highlighting the impact of coronavirus on disabled people. It needs to be stressed here and now that, you know, thousands of disabled people had do not resuscitate orders placed on their medical records without their knowledge, without consent of the families. That if you had a learning disability and you're in the 18 to 30 age group, you were 30 times more likely to die from coronavirus than non-disabled people. This was, you know, Office of National Statistics, and also from the coronavirus deaths, you know, 2/5 of coronavirus deaths were disabled people. So we're going to be highlighting, you know, the dreadful impact of coronavirus, and, you know, saying to the government, we're not going to be silenced on that. We will hold you to account on, you know, on the deaths of disabled people, on the social care cuts, on the universal credit cuts, on what's happening with claimants on legacy benefits. And, you know, DPAC are not going away. We've been out there 11 years. And, you know, over the years, disabled people have been a spearhead of resistance. We've got a long and proud history of that, and we will continue with that. Then on we're looking at having around the 30th, which is the Wednesday, hopefully having a demo outside number 10 to, pile pressure on the government around universal credit and to make them rethink. Then obviously we then go into October, which the Tory party conference. So we've got a speaker at the People's Assembly National Demonstration in Manchester. So there's a short accessible demonstration at 1 o'clock, but we're asking people to support DPAC Sheffield speaking at the rally, obviously. And Manchester DPAC have come up with this brilliant idea of what is called disability justice on screen. They're asking disabled people to make 1 to 2 minute videos, and they've got donations for an ad van. So a huge ad van with a video screen is going to be on the back, showing videos of what have happened to disabled people during lockdown, but also the impact of austerity, telling the appalling truth to the government and to delegates. And they're in the process of organising a big online Zoom meeting that will be screened, the day of Rishi Sunak's most keynote speech on the 4th of October. So that's what we're going to be doing. So if people can support the 25th, the 28th and 4th of October, that would be fantastic.
Sure, we'll recap some of them at the end. I like the idea of the video van. It's very led by donkeys style, isn't it? Yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant way of doing it, displaying videos, messages from disabled people on a loop, essentially on a screen at Tory party conference or just outside of it. And it's fundamentally, it's going to shame them into hopefully doing something about it, or at least highlighting the issue again. So less led by donkeys, more led by DPAC. It's yeah, I shall look forward to seeing some of those videos myself. No doubt they'll make it onto social media as well. Now, one of the other, we're going to move on to the universal from universal credit. We're going to move on to the issue of the legacy benefits. Yeah, so it's the people who are on the legacy benefits are predominantly the long-term sick and the most disabled people in the country. The reason these people have never been put onto universal credit is because universal credit has never worked to a point that it will support their needs, their financial needs. It does not support them in a way the old benefit system has had. But these claimants have been left without any support whatsoever. The government have turned around, and although they've given a £20 uplift to universal credit claimants, they have made every excuse under the sun to deny that to the legacy benefit claimants. They've never received the uplift. They've never received anything else. What is the government's excuse for this, and how many people are affected by it?
There's about 2.2 million legacy benefit claimants, and 3/4 of that number are disabled people who were not included in the £20 uplift during the pandemic. And the government's excuse to it, when Rishi Sunak was interviewed by Martin Lewis back in March, his attitude was disabled people can voluntarily go onto universal credit and, transfer over to that. But basically what he's done is he has created a 2-tier benefit system. If you're disabled, you're not going to get the support you need. He basically said, well, if you're in low paid work where you're working, we'll support you. Well, he's just cut universal credit, so he's not supporting the worker either. But for disabled people, the support just isn't there. He's just not interested in doing that. So for two disabled claimants to take on the government in the courts is a big deal, actually, especially as the government's made it harder for people to get judicial reviews granted. So this is a really, really big case. And basically their angle is, they're looking at the European Convention on Human Rights, that legacy benefit claimants' human rights were violated in not getting the £20 uplift when it was needed during the pandemic. And obviously for myself, I'm a legacy benefit claimant too, and I was shielding during the pandemic. And it was just making, I couldn't get an online priority shopping slot, and the supermarkets used the pandemic to double their online delivery slots from £2 to £4. When you didn't have that money, an extra £2 was difficult to find to pay for online shopping. Energy prices rose, the cost of personal protective equipment rose if you had PAs and, you know, social carers coming in and everything. You'd having to find the money for that. But for me, I couldn't get paracetamol on prescription anymore. For many GPs, you can buy it over the counter. I couldn't get prescription for pain during the pandemic because people were stockpiling it, and what little there was, people, businesses and everything were profiteering. I was having to use social media to put a call out to people, if anyone got any spare paracetamol to help me cope with the pain during lockdown. And that was really hard for me to do, to reach out to people. But, you know, my branch were absolutely brilliant, sourcing online food links and everything like that for me to access, because I couldn't get supermarket deliveries. And having, you know, not having family, you know, well, that family was shielding, friends were shielding, so you didn't have people you could rely on to get the shopping and everything for you. You were relying on online deliveries and everything, and being shielding for almost a year as I was, and, you know, you were worrying about, you know, there was a shortage of pasta, there was a shortage of tinned tomatoes, there was a shortage of, you know, the basics, you know, because people were stockpiling early on and they weren't thinking about disabled people who couldn't get out, who couldn't get those items. You were also in fear of, you were in fear of your life as well, especially when you were classed extremely clinically vulnerable and in group 4 and having to shield. Life got really down to basics. I was stretching items of food to make them last because I couldn't obtain any others. And the prices of hand sanitizer, a friend of mine was quoted £15 for a bottle of Carex sanitizer in a pharmacy that was £1 like 3 weeks before that. Told her she didn't buy it, she was going to die, you know. And, you know, it was that kind of thing. The prices of things just went up and up and up and up and up. And when you didn't have that £20 a week to help with that, life got pretty serious. You were making really, really hard choices of, can I buy fresh fruit today, or can I buy that tin of food tomorrow, and everything like that. It was incredibly stressful. And to be honest with you, for me, and, you know, I'm sure I've read similar stories, you know, there were similar stories to mine. And obviously what, Damien, what you were saying earlier, you know, with what your wife and everything like that. But I mean, the Disability Benefits Consortium did a report, you know, the millions missing out, and 78% of, you know, claimants said they were spending the £20 per week extra on food, and 74% said they were worse off, you know, over the course of the pandemic. And it was the last figure that really got to me. And I broke down in front of a journalist yesterday when I said this to her. You know, about 46% of claimants, when they were asked what would the £20 uplift on legacy benefits mean to them, you know what the response was?
Go on.
They'd be life-changing to them. Life-changing.
Yeah.
The extra £20 a week would be life-changing. That they could buy fresh food, they could pay their energy bills, they could heat their homes, you know, life-changing.
Yeah.
We're in the 21st century, for Christ's sake. £20, and you're having, you know, you've got claimants saying it would be life-changing. You know, this money should be just given. You know, it should just be given. They've got the money.
Of course they have.
They've got the money. Give it to us.
Of course they have.
Simple as. But they don't want to. They're quite happy to just get us to. They're quite happy to starve us. They're quite happy to see many more of us die. And they know that appalling decisions they made during lockdown. They knew people were going to die, and die in their thousands they did. And that is an absolute travesty. The only place this government should be is in the dock in The Hague, facing human rights abuses, because basically what this amounts to is genocide. There's no other word for it. No other word for what they've done. None. They've got blood on their hands.
Yeah. All right, Paula. Yeah, clearly, this is extremely sensitive for subject for you.
It's not personal. Sensitive. It's personal.
Personal.
The cut to universal credit. You know, when I've got friends and everything on it, it's personal. What this government are doing, when I've lost friends and family members during the pandemic and fellow activists, it's personal.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we fight.
Yeah.
Because it's personal, and also because we care about our communities and our fellow human beings, and we don't want to see another person die or go hungry. To see the 5th richest country on earth allow its children to go hungry should hold its head in shame. And to be honest with you, to see a Labour Party with no teeth, no balls, and won't stand up to the Tories is an absolute outrage in itself. And for Keir Starmer to renege on social care and saying, oh no, we can't, you know, we can't have social care free at the point of need because it's a stick the Tories will use to beat us with. Well, the Labour Party should be taking a bloody big stick to the Tories on the cuts to social care, on the cuts to universal credit, on legacy benefits, on workers' rights, on fire and rehire and everything. We need an opposition with teeth. But the only opposition are us grassroots activists. Why it's really important for everyone to join us on the 25th, on the 28th, and let's build a mass grassroots movement, join the fights together and hit this government back, because that is the only way change happens on the streets, in our communities, and we've got to make that happen. And that's where it does happen every day. Someone helping someone else, or you get benefits justice for someone, you're fighting, you're beating this government, and that's important to stress.
Yeah, I would challenge anybody who's just listened to that to not feel their heartstrings being pulled, quite frankly, and not want to get involved with this. I would strongly urge everybody to get involved in a DPAC action that's coming up over the next few weeks. The £20 gets spent, life-changing. Unfortunately, the people who are making the rules, for them, it's sofa change. They just don't value it. They don't see the sensitivity in it. They can always find money for things like war. They can find plenty of money for a broken, failed test and trace system, but there's never money to support the most vulnerable in society. And you can't help but think it's because they don't see them as, they don't value them. They don't see them as natural conservative voters, I guess. Why would they be? And therefore they do not warrant the support of the state when this party is unfortunately in power. The shortages that you spoke about and people stockpiling, the thing that always struck me while you were talking about that was, well, it must be nice for people to be able to go out and stockpile whenever they want, because for so often people in the position that we are in, as disabled people, as carers, your money goes in on a certain day, you do your shopping that day, and you can't do it on another day, because once you've done your shopping, that's it, it's gone until the next week. So when the shelves are being emptied during the week, and all you can do is essentially watch and hope that a delivery comes in. And it's even worse at the moment. It's even more pertinent as shortages are being seen in supermarkets up and down the country. It's even more difficult to get the basics, just the stuff that you need. And that is in itself a disgrace. And I'd never forget what Rishi Sunak also said, which was that the uplift was intended to support people who are in work. And of course, the legacy benefit claims, they're not all disabled people. They're not all long-term sick. There are people still on job seekers allowance. There are still people on the work-related activity group for employment and support allowance that have fallen through the cracks here, that have not had that uplift. These are people seeking work or are in or have very poor employment, and they have not had any support whatsoever. It's a miserable excuse that he's come out with, and it is absolutely a two-tier system that he's created here, and that is a legal violation. So I sincerely wish the two individuals in question who have brought this case, they're taking this case to the High Court on the 28th, the very best of luck, because a large amount of people, a large amount of extremely sick and disabled people are watching with great interest to see what the outcome of that is going to be. Now you've spoken about a little bit about some of the cases of the people that have been affected who have not had this additional support. The legal challenge itself is being heard by the High Court on the 28th and the 29th of September. Can you tell me anything about the people who have brought this case and how it has come to this point that the government has had to be dragged to this in order to address this this two-tier system they've created?
I can't speak about, obviously, the two claimants who bought it, because obviously it's a legal case and it could compromise it. So, but all I can talk about is obviously the stories that, you know, we've collected. I mean, I read one today, you know, it would mean if they got the £20 uplift that they could buy fresh fruit, for example. They haven't had fresh fruit in over a year. And, you know, additional dietary ingredients to make nutritious food with, they've had to go without, things like that. And it's just, you know, heartbreaking stories. But when you read what, you know, the words, it would be life changing, that really got to me. Some of the stories have had me up 2-3 o'clock in the morning thinking, what could we do that is different? How can we force this government back? Over the 11 years, the amount of times that I've been up 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning helping people who need this support because they've got nowhere else to go, you know. And I mean, when you're seeing welfare rights advice centres closing, you know, there's no access to legal aid or anything like that. You know, we've had to learn the law to change the law, you know. When you're left with no other choice, we're having to take the actions we have. You know, we've had to storm Parliament for the right for the Independent Living Fund. We've had to block roads for the welfare reform bill and everything like that. You know, if anybody thinks taking direct action's easy, they want to come out on the street and try it. But I'll tell you something now, you know, I've occupied buses, I've stormed Parliament, I've occupied the lobby of Parliament quite a few times and everything like that. But you know something, it's the most amazing feeling when you're standing with your friends and comrades. They're all feeling the same as you. And the amount of support we've had on direct actions from people, from members of the public and everything like that has been truly amazing. I mean, you know, it's not easy to go out there and protest and everything, but you know, it's really terrible because when I was crossing the road with my Unite friends yesterday, I wanted to block the road outside Parliament, and every time
just for the sake of it, you know.
No, every time I'm that angry, every time I cross the road, I just want to shut it down and say, you know, this government are doing this, this, and this, and this. And I think it's really important that people go out there and educate members of the public, educate what's happening to your school, what's happening to your GP surgery, what's happening to social care, what's happening to your family members who are disabled. Talk to people out in the community. I do it all the time. I have conversations on waiting rooms, buses, trains, all the time. I've got leaflets and everything. I'm educating people on, you know, when I hear racism in the streets, I'm educating people about why they're wrong on being racist. You know, it's important to have those conversations and educate people as well. It's really important because you change people's minds when you change that narrative. If you wake 1 or 2 people up and you make them, oh, you do that and you think, hold on, yeah, you're right. You've woken 2 or 3 people up who thought differently, who might have voted Tory yesterday, but won't tomorrow, you know? And I think as more and more people are getting affected, they're thinking, hold on, this government's totally wrong in what they're doing, you know? And he's losing support. He's really losing support. And you see in the polls and everything like that. But, you know, what was heartening to me on an anti-racism demo recently I had in Croydon was the amount of younger people that joined in as well. And it was the biggest demo we'd had in Croydon for 8 or 9 years. And it was absolutely amazing to see younger people coming in, holding up signs, you know, refugees are welcome here and everything like that, standing in front of police officers and saying to the far right protesters, you're wrong, you know, what we're doing on our foreign policy and wars and everything to, you know, disperse people in the first place is totally wrong. And we're seeing, I think, that with climate action, you know, with the school strikes around the climate actions, you're seeing school kids taking action. It's brilliant because at the end of the day, they're the future of our movement. We're not going to be here forever. The younger people are the future of our movement, and they need to carry on where, you know, we've left off. And I hope, you know, I'd love to see, you know, my nieces and nephews are interested in climate action and have been on strike for the planet and everything like that. And that's absolutely brilliant. And I mean, they're interested. They ask questions to me all the time about, you know, the libraries and everything like that, and how they've supported, you know, toy banks and food banks and everything like that, you know. And I talk to them all the time about why it's important to, you know, support, you know, the NHS staff. And I think one of them wants to come and join me when the NHS staff do eventually go out on strike because they've had treatment. You know, I'm doing this for my nieces and nephews and for their futures and for their kids. That's why we fight. That's why we do this, because you want them to have the access to the services that we had. And also you don't want them to go through some of the issues that we're going through. We are doing this because we want to build a better world, an equal world for our children, where they've got a chance, where they've got a future. And that's exactly why we do this.
Yeah, and it's gratifying that so many young people are engaged and are getting involved in this. And it's empowering when you get a lot of people coming out and demonstrating and campaigning for something. You have a lot of people around you, you know, you've got that support around you. It is empowering, you know, a bit of solidarity, a bit of collectivism, as we often talk about in the trade union movement. We're both unite. It is empowering, and that is where the strength is. It's strength in numbers. We have all the power. It's just learning to come together and using it as one in order to drive these points home. And there are so many issues that so many people are angry about, that we need to support each other in each of our causes and make sure that these messages are getting sent to the parliamentarians to say, we're not going to keep putting up with this. Enough is enough. We're sick of being treated like crap. You know, we're not yours to. We're not your football to kick around. It's not on. We expect to be treated with far more respect than this, and be treated like human beings in what is supposed to be a civilized country. Because right now, for disabled people, for migrants, it's not a civilized country at all. It really isn't. We have been under the cosh for so many years now. It's been 11 very, very long years of Conservative rule. As much as polling is saying that Johnson's support is waning, there's not really much sign of another party taking the Tories out of power at the moment, led as the Labour Party is right now. Neither of us have got very much good to say about the Labour Party leadership right now. Not at all. So we've got to, as you say, we've got to do it for ourselves.
But I think that going back to legacy benefit claimants, if people want to make a 1-minute video about why the court case is so important to them, why they're supporting it, and sharing a little bit about their story. The thing is, what's so important in campaigning is people's personal testimonies of how they've been affected. You know, how they've been affected by the £20 uplift cut to universal credit, how they've been impacted by not getting the £20 uplift with legacy benefits. It's people's personal testimonies that makes a real difference to campaigning. It's adding people's voices to ours. There's voices out there that've never been heard, and we need to hear those voices. Sure, people don't want to hear about me all the time, but there's loads of people out there that've got powerful stories, and we need to hear those powerful stories, you know, that can add their voices to ours in a collective. And I think, you know, some of the brilliant things about DPAC is that, you know, the creativity with different protests and everything we've had over the years, and this with Audio Riot, making a load of noise with drums and whistles and coming together and having protest songs and standing there and just voicing our, you know, the noise being our voice of anger, you know. And also I think the brilliance of Manchester DPAC's video screen of disability justice, showing the personal stories in one screen to delegates. You know, when we've done balls to the budget, throwing balls at, you know, number 10, and when we threw them at the Tory delegates in 2015 and we hit Boris Johnson on the head with a great big beach ball, but it got attention, you know. It's creative, it's different, but also I think, you know, it's collecting evidence, you know, for MPs, for councillors, for the media, but also for history, because history would judge this government. Believe you me, history will judge this government. And, you know, what I will say is karma will come around to this government in one form or another. It always does. But history will judge this government in the decisions it made in the last 12 months and in the last 11 years, subsequent governments and coalition governments especially. But the message to everybody out there is, you know, please join our voices with ours, join a campaign. There's something passionate you care about, and become active. I don't regret a minute of being a campaigner. I've been a campaigner for many, many years. I've had some amazing experiences as an activist. I've met some amazing people. I've had some absolutely uplifting conversations. I've been on some amazing actions. I've cried with fellow activists. I've laughed with fellow activists. I've bled with fellow activists. But you know what? Being a campaigner, you know, nobody would rather be doing this. But you know, when there's something you care about that's under attack, you have no choice, you know. And I think for me, you know, my great grandmother, you know, she fought for the right for women to vote. She fought for the NHS. I mean, my family have given 73 years service to the NHS, and we passionately believe in free universal healthcare. And she was really fortunate to meet Nye Bevan, the founding father of the NHS. I wish I'd been there because I'd love to have met him, to be honest. He's a hero of mine. And she always said to me once, you know, your rights were hard fought for. They were hard won. And they will always take those rights away from you. You'll always be fighting to keep what you've won. She said, but never forget what people in your history went through to get the rights you have, and never take them for granted, because they'll always be taking them from you. And be prepared for a fight to keep them and protect them for future generations. She was a big believer in that. So I hope I'm making her proud. She did think I'd carry on the fight, I think, but, you know, and also say to people, join a trade union. You know, there's power in a union, and people need to, especially with the, you know, the dreadful working practice of fire and rehire. I mean, being on the picket line with British gas workers back in February and what they went through. And we heard of a disabled worker, it was Asda's, who went through that dreadful practice. Speaking at TUC just recently, it's really important that I think the workers are going to have to collectively organise and literally join the fights together to fight this government back. And that's going to be, hearing some of the conversations with the unions at the moment, they're going to have to be prepared for one heck of a fight back for the attacks that are coming, because believe you me, and I think I can't stress this enough, this government are on a scorched earth policy agenda where there'll be nothing left.
Yeah.
There won't be a welfare state. There won't be an NHS. There won't be a local government like we know it now. There will be nothing left. It will be an insurance model system for welfare state and the NHS. And if you can't pay for it, you're not going to get it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Paula Peters, we've got to have to end it there. I'm afraid we've come to coming up to the end of our hour. I heartily agree with your sentiments. I think you are making your family members proud. I think you are absolutely right with the trade union movement. I think that's where the fight back is going to be at this moment in time. I think it will be in the trade union movement, and I think anybody who's not in a trade union absolutely should be. There is a trade union for everybody, whatever your walk of life. It's a busy few weeks coming up for DPAC, as Paula mentioned earlier on in the show. There's the Audio Riot events happening around the country that will be happening on Saturday, the 25th of September. On the 28th of September, there will be a vigil at the Royal Courts of Justice from 9:15 to 10 a.m. for those two people who are fighting to get universal credit, who are fighting to get the legacy benefits even, the justice for the lack of the uplift for legacy benefit claimants. Make sure you are also at that King's Cross event, which is rather secretive still, but make sure you take plenty of noisy articles along with you for that, and use the hashtags 20 more for all and hashtag Audio Riot on your social media. Follow DPAC on Facebook, on Twitter. Make sure you are following their events on their website as well, to make sure you are kept apprised of all of the details of all the events that Paula has outlined today, and make sure you get involved with one near you, because this is important stuff, folks. If they can treat disabled people like this time, it will be somebody else next time. It might be you. So a stand has to be made against a government that insists on attacking its own people constantly. It's been doing it for 11 years. I'm not making it up. So come on, it's time to make a stand, and we stand together, we're stronger.